Chapter 10 Emotion. Our learning objective is to describe the biological basis of impulse control, neurochemicals, and its neurostructures. Things to know. Background information. Emotion is the positive or negative reactions from different types of situations. There is no such thing as a neutral emotion. Emotion refers to the behavior an individual commits when paired with a stimuli. Emotions involve patterns of physiological changes that are associated with urges to perform a certain behavior. Emotional behaviors have helped guide evolution of human brains. Emotions as a response pattern. The three main components of emotional responses are behavioral, which consists of muscular movements that are brought forward by specific events, and anomic, which facilitate behavior and offer quick mobilization energy to certain movements, hormonal, which reinforces the anomic responses. An increase in blood flow to muscles causes them to use their stored nutrients. Negative emotions are highly associated with defending ourselves and loved ones. The amygdala becomes activated when emotional relevant stimuli is presented. The structure and formation of emotional responses, including impulse behavior. The amygdala plays a role in the organization of emotional responses to certain events. The amygdala is divided into 12 parts, but the three main ones for the use of emotion are the lateral nucleus, central nucleus, and the basal nucleus. The lateral nucleus receives sensory information from the neural cortex, thalamus, and hippocampus and sends projections to the basal nucleus, accessory basal, and the central nucleus of the amygdala. The central nucleus is the region of the amygdala that receives information from the basal nucleus, lateral nucleus, and the accessory basal nuclei, and sends projections to a wide variety of regions in the brain. It is also involved in emotional responses. The lateral nucleus and the basal nucleus send information to the ventromedial prefrontal cortex. This picture shows the connections between the amygdala and important brain regions. When the central nucleus is activated, it incites plenty of emotional responses. This picture shows important brain regions that receive input from the central nucleus of the amygdala and the emotional responses produced by different regions. Aggression as a species typical behavior. A species typical behavior is those behaviors a species or individual are born with, aka in their genetic makeup. The muscular movements that are involved in attacking and defending are produced by neural circuits in the brainstem. Activity in the brainstem is controlled by the amygdala and hippocampus. The amygdala and the hippocampus are controlled by perceptual systems that can be detected in the environment. Serotonin in aggression, emotional responses. Lower levels of serotonin have been highly correlated with emotional responses in both humans and animals. Researchers conducted experiments on monkeys to assess serotonergic activity in the cerebrospinal fluid to analyze 5-HIAA, a metabolite of serotonin. These researchers found that monkeys with lower levels of 5-HIAA had higher levels of anger directed towards older animals, dangerous, unprovoked leaping from trees, fighting members of the same species but had no chance in winning. Also, the ones with lower levels of 5-HIAA ended up dying or getting killed when compared with those who had higher levels. The ones with higher levels of 5-HIAA showed a higher survival rate. Also, research on humans has been conducted and suggests that genetic components play a role in the development of behavioral traits. Researchers found that low levels of 5-HIAA in the CSF is highly associated with aggression and antisocial behaviors. These behaviors also included behaviors like assault, arson, murder, and child beating. Role of the ventromedial prefrontal cortex. Impulse violence is associated with faulty emotional regulation. The structure of the VMPFC includes the medial orbital frontal cortex and the subguinal anterior cingulate cortex. The input structures involved provide information about what is happening in the environment and what plans are being made. Also, the outputs involved allow the VMPFC to affect behaviors and physiological responses that include more emotional regulation by the amygdala. It also communicates with different regions of the prefrontal cortex. Individuals with damage to the VMPFC show a relationship between emotional dysfunction and impairments in the real-world setting. Individuals with damage to this area lack emotional responsiveness in situations that decision-making is important. The prefrontal cortex and moral judgments. What causes impulse behavior? Evidence has shown that the prefrontal cortex is involved in making moral judgments. It also plays a role in the suppression of emotional behavior due to the negative consequences it may lead to. Utilitarian and personal moral judgments are stimulus for the prefrontal cortex. Individuals with damage to the VMPFC tend to make more utilitarian, harmful actions for the greater good judgments when compared to those that did not have the damage. Individuals with no damage to the VMPFC or prefrontal cortex were against making utilitarian judgments due to the unpleasant emotional reaction of hurting another person. Serotonin is an essential neurotransmitter in the VMPFC and prefrontal cortex. Decreased amounts of serotonin are associated with aggression, violence, and risk-taking behaviors. When serotonin is released, it activates the prefrontal cortex. So in the study that I found interesting was called for the difficulties in emotional regulation and impulse control during cocaine abstinence. Fox et al. 2006. This study aims to investigate emotional regulation changes over time in newly abstinent treatment-seeking cocaine-independent individuals when compared to a community-controlled volunteers. Participants in the first group were 28 females and 32 males seeking treatment for cocaine dependence. The second group consisted of 24 females and 26 males that were healthy volunteers. They used the difficulties in emotion regulation scale DERS to measure participants. So researchers concluded that the group of participants that were seeking treatment showed a significant difference on impulse awareness, strategies, and clarity, but at discharge only showed a significant difference on impulse and awareness when compared to the other group.